Thanks, Erica. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to switch gears and do a little policy and labeling talk. So my name is Bayli Larson. I'm in the Office of Generic Drug Policy on the Patent and Exclusivity team. I'm here today presenting with my OGD colleague, Sunny Pian from the Division of Labeling Review. We're going to talk about ANDA's labeling requirements for Rx-to-OTC switched products. Before we begin, just want to go over the learning objectives. We'll explain how a prescription or Rx drug product may initiate the change in marketing status to over-the-counter or OTC through the new drug application or NDA process. We'll discuss the process for labeling and policy updates when a reference-listed drug or RLD undergoes an Rx-to-OTC switch, and identify the roles of the agency and the roles of you all, the applicant. So just want to read the room and online a little bit. There'll be the poll online and we'll collect the results. I won't be able to see them live, but how many in the room have you sought approval for an Rx-to-OTC product? Anyone, yes? Okay, and I'm assuming the rest are no or with the FDA. So thank you. We've got a couple, and hopefully you will learn something, and if your RLD ever makes the switch in the future, you can remember some of these tips. So as an overview, there's two types of Rx-to-OTC switches. There's a full switch and a partial switch. The full switch is when an NDA holder switches the drug product covered under the NDA to OTC manufacturing status in its entirety. So in other words, all the conditions of use. When a full switch occurs, there is no longer the prescription product. It's only marketed as over-the-counter. We'll be focusing on full switches for this presentation. A partial switch is when a NDA holder switches some of the conditions of use while retaining others with a prescription status. This usually requires a full new NDA, and the product will have different conditions of use. So examples of this are levocetirizine solution or proton pump inhibitors. I'm sure we've all seen that PPIs can be over the counter for short-term GERD or prescription status for things like peptic ulcer disease. So we'll focus on full switch tips today. So how does a full switch come about? The NDA holder will switch the drug product to non-prescription marketing status in its entirety by submitting an efficacy supplement. We've talked a lot about PAS today with David and John, so the similar things. There was a change in recent years in the agency that the Rx and OTC product are now considered the same drug product, so they'll even have the same product code. NDA holders may submit patents within 30 days from the date of approval of the efficacy supplement. And holders or applicants of approved and pending ANDAs referencing that NDA must submit a supplement or amendment to their ANDA relying on the RLD for OTC conditions of use and associated labeling. So that's really the key bullet here for this audience. It does not require a completely new ANDA, which as we know is beneficial. There'll be no unnecessary data collection, quicker review times, and no user fee agreements. So here's some high-level regulations. After a supplement is approved, the FDA will continue to list the patent information that was listed for the original NDA for 30 days or until Form 3542 is submitted. If the patent was already listed in the Orange Book, the patent submission date will stay the original pre-switch date. If patent information is submitted, the date for the patent information will reflect the original date of submission. Some examples of this are a relisting of method of use codes, adding a new patent to cover the new conditions of use, or a revised MOU. If the NDA holder does not submit Form 3542 within the 30-day period, the carried over patent information will be removed from the Orange Book at the end of the 30-day period. Because the OTC and Rx product are now considered to be the same listed drug, that also applies to 180-day exclusivity. So why do we care about this, and what does it matter, and kind of what's the history behind all this? So it all goes back to the patient, right? We need to protect the public. In the 1940s and 1960s, there was abuse of amphetamines and barbiturates, which was one key factor that led to the Durham Humphrey Amendment of 1951. So this act was what distinguished the OTC and Rx drugs. Prior to this, the determination as to whether a drug was safe and effective for self-medication was left to the manufacturer. So as you can imagine, this was really confusing for patients and pharmacists and other healthcare providers, and it limited the agency in deciding what was safe for over-the-counter use without medical supervision. So this amendment in 1951 gave the agency regulatory power. This is also where the labeling of Rx only came from. So we've all seen the caution, federal law prohibits dispensing without a prescription. And when things like this break down, we get misbranding. So Rx and OTC versions of the same drug product are not permitted to be marketed at the same time. We must have a reasonable difference, so either dosage or indication or route of administration. Failure to maintain labeling that is consistent with that of the RLD is basis to propose withdrawing approval of an ANDA. So I'll now bring up Sunny to tell you a little bit more about the labeling requirements.
So thank you, Bayli. So again, my name is Sunny Pian, and I'm from the Division of Labeling Review. And I'm going to kind of go over what this means actually for your ANDA application. So first, we're going to discuss pending original applications. Pending ANDA, if there is a Rx to OTC switch, you must submit an amendment to conform to the labeling requirements. So if new patent information for the OTC entry compared to that of the prescription entry is listed, that is, newly listed patent or revised method of use, and the applicant must provide an appropriate certification, recertification, or statement. So I'm going to provide you with the hypothetical, just kind of example. So let's say that there is a drug, and we're going to call this drug Dendrocalm. This is completely made up, so you don't need to look it up. So let's say for this drug Dendrocalm, it has the prescription or the Rx indication, and the indication is for the treatment of the fear of forest. So you're definitely afraid of the forest, and has 3 patents associated with it. Patent number 1 is for the treatment of the fear of trees. Okay, patent number 2 is a treatment of the fear of pine trees. Okay, and then patent number 3 would be for the fear of bugs, because we find bugs in trees. So now the NDA submits an OTC switchover, and let's say for the OTC indication, it's approved, or they're proposing to treat short-term fear of trees. So as you can see, with this indication, it's a more limited indication, but it's still overlapping. So the first indication, so the treatment for the fear of the forest, the first Rx indication, no longer exists when it switches over to the OTC product. So the NDA applicant, or the NDA sponsor, let's say, submits a new efficacy supplement for a full switch to the OTC. So patents 1 and 2, so again, patent 1 was the fear of for the treatment for the fear of trees, and number 2 was for the treatment of fear of pine trees. Okay, so patent number 1 and 2, they get carried over, and the use code stays the same. At this point, the ANDA applicant must recertify. Now, for patent number 3, which is fear of bugs, it is not carried over as it is not related to the OTC indication. So the NDA, with the OTC supplement being approved, the patent and the use codes are must be addressed by the ANDA. So again, patent numbers 1 and 2, which has the overlapping indication or protection for treatment of fear of trees and pine trees, they must be certified or recertified. Okay, so now that we discussed the pending originals, we will discuss approved applications. So ANDAs are responsible for monitoring the Orange Book for updates to the RLD. So approved ANDAs is required to submit a prior approval supplement, a PAS, to comply with the updated labeling requirements. So generally, an ANDA labeling must be same as your RLD, with the exception of things that may be due to manufacturing or distributor differences. And again, along with monitoring for the Orange Book, it is also the ANDA applicant's responsibility to monitor drugs at FDA to make sure that you submit supplements or amendments accordingly when your RLD updates. And again, specifically for the Rx to OTC switches, the ANDA applicant must submit a PAS as soon as possible. Otherwise, your ANDA is considered to be misbranded. So when you do submit your PAS or your amendment, but in particularly for the PAS, a filing review and subsequent acknowledgement supplemental ANDA receipt letter will be issued with the appropriate goal date attached to it. And this PAS will undergo standard review practices. OGD will then issue any formal communication through our standard practice through the IR and the DRL, so information request or discipline review letter process. So now I have challenge questions. So for challenge question number 1, which of the following statement is not true? Is it A, Rx and OTC versions of the same drug products are permitted to be marketed at the same time? B, pending ANDAs should submit an amendment to switch their ANDA drug products from Rx to OTC. C, ANDA applicant is responsible to update their labeling. And D, FDA does not consider post-full switch NDA product to be a different listed drug. Any ideas? Yes. Thank you. So the correct answer is A. Rx and OTC versions of the same drug products, it says, are permitted, but they are not permitted to be marketed at the same time, as Bayli has discussed in her presentation. Okay, so challenge question number 2. What type of submission should approved ANDA applicants submit for a full Rx to OTC switch? A CBE 0. B, CBE 30, C, a PAS, or D, submit a new ANDA? Correct, thank you for paying attention. Yes, a PAS. You will be submitting a prior approval supplement. So in summary, pre and post full switch drug products are considered to be the same drug product under section 505J 5B4 of the FD&C Act. ANDA applicants are required to update their labeling to be consistent with the most recent approved RLD labeling. Pending ANDAs must recertify to any new or updated patents from the RLD. And lastly, monitor for RLD updates. When an Rx to OTC switch is identified, submit a PAS or an amendment as soon as possible.